Well, the garden is definitely looking a lot more dead and empty since the last time we picked up. I've been doing a little bit of cleanup here and there, but today I'm really hoping to get a lot of work done, and I'll show you my method on just the cleanup process, and then we have some next steps to prepare our garden for a really solid, hopefully solid season next year. So we're talking soil testing, putting compost down, soil amendments, all that good stuff. And this fall has been especially challenging for me on the cleanup phase. Usually I just have a big weekend and I knock it out, but we have been spending every spare minute back at our build site to try and get Ryan's new shop all dried in before winter hits, and that could be any day now. Last year we had a massive blizzard where we got a foot of snow on Halloween. So the garden has unfortunately taken the back burner, but I'm hoping tonight we can knock a bunch out and we'll see how much we get done. I have a hierarchy of things from most important to least important, and this is real life. I'm bringing you along the journey on just how this year is going. We may or may not get through the list, but we'll do our best. Here you can see the tomatoes are long gone. We got into the low 20s this week. So the tomatoes definitely didn't survive that. So I'm gonna work on getting these guys out. My first order of business is to get these tomatoes out of here, including the little tomatoes, because they're gonna drop seeds and then I'll have baby tomatoes everywhere come springtime, but the chickens love them. Tomato plants I definitely want to get out of here pretty quick because a lot of them had blight this year because we had so much rain, which was a blessing but a curse in some ways as far as disease goes. And blight can carry on in your soil, in any residual plant matter, so we definitely want to get these guys out. And I'm trying to be careful so I don't knock any of the leaves off. And again, just picking up any of the dropped fruit. It's not my favorite part of gardening. Definitely my least favorite, I'd say, the whole cleanup. It's worth it though. You definitely don't want to just leave this stuff here over winter. Not only is it going to be a super mess by spring once it's halfway decomposed, but then you can have disease harboring in your soil and all that. So take the time now. It'll be worth it in the end. They're just everywhere. I feel like I'm stepping on them like bombs. Now we have the cucumber trellis. So this all has to come down because it's really important that you rotate your plants to different spots every year. So on like a 4-year rotation is ideal. That way you don't harbor common pests and disease in the same spot for the same plant over and over. Plus, certain plants like certain nutrients. So if they're in the same place for a long time, they can basically wear out those certain nutrients. So as much as I would love to keep this tomato trellis in place, it needs to come down because it's going somewhere else next year. And I feel like these cucumbers are always the hardest to get out of here because they're just everywhere. And I don't necessarily want plant debris again to be down in my soil. Thankfully, I don't think I had much for disease issues with my cucumbers to where I'm not super worried about it, but I think I'm gonna toss it in the lawn again and deal with it out there. There are a decent amount of weeds down here because I did not mulch this section. Not necessarily for a particular reason, I just never got around to it. And I don't know, the whole weed thing in the fall, I always struggle. Like, do I spend time dealing with it now when I'm tired of being out here and I have other things to do? Or do I go after the weeds in the spring when I'm itching to be out here, but I can't plant yet, and it gives me something to do outside. So I kind of just get the big stuff and plan to get the rest in the spring. So a couple more tomatoes down here. It's good enough for me. Next we have my little pathetic baby pepper plants. Definitely going to be changing my strategy based on my pepper experiment this year. If you missed some of my garden tours where I go through these experiments, definitely check it out. But in a nutshell, I figured out that raised beds are just so much better for me in northern Minnesota, where we just don't get the heat that these peppers like. So the in-ground garden just stayed a bit too cool for their liking. And if you haven't noticed by now, I'm someone that just rips the plants out of the ground, roots and all. I know some people leave the roots in place. They'll just cut it off so that so there's less disturbance of the soil, or, you know, leaving those nutrients to compost down into the soil. And I get that, but I don't know. I just like cleaning it up. I'm in the cleanup club, I guess. Plus I figure if I'm gonna come back maybe in this bed and seed some delicate seeds, I don't want to deal with roots in the way. So just keep it simple around here. Maybe I'll change my mind someday. One last pepper here. Now these are, or were, poblanos, so they're a little bit bigger of a plant, so that's why I have these little cages on there. When I first started gardening, I bought these cages for tomatoes. Yeah, figured that out pretty quick. Highly insufficient. And so I just use them for peppers now. I couldn't bear to get rid of them. There's always a use for something. But would I buy them only for peppers? No. I think a stick works just fine for the most part. Some of these cages have seen better days. Need Ryan to weld them back together for me. Ugh. Slimy little suckers. Let's get my shovel. I try to shake as much the soil off the plant as I can. Don't want to waste it. Worked hard getting that soil where it is. That was a beast pepper. Did not want to go. There. Just kind of getting some of the weeds pulled. We made some decent progress here. We got the tomatoes out, the cucumbers, the peppers. There's still a bunch left to go, but we are losing daylight. The days are getting incredibly short here quickly here in northern Minnesota. So I think instead of pulling out the rest of the plants, which is kind of boring, you guys don't want to watch me continuing to just pull all the plants out, let's switch gears and move over to disposing of the plant matter. Because that is one of the biggest questions that I get asked. What do I do with all of this stuff? So you really have three options, I guess. One is composting it in your compost bin. I'm really picky about what goes in my compost bin, especially if I have anything that has potential disease issues. So those tomatoes for sure are not going in there. And to be honest, a lot of that stuff is pretty fibrous, like the big hard stalks. It's gonna take a lot of work to get that to compost down. So I actually don't put much plant matter into my compost bins. Maybe the leaves of my broccoli plants, or, you know, the tops of my carrots. I'll do that type of a thing, but not my carrots this year because they got aster yellows. So definitely not doing that one. So that leads me to option number two. So you can compost your plant matter, but just don't do it in your compost bin that's dedicated for replenishing your garden soil. And then the third option is a burn pile. If you have a pile and you're in a rural area, you could technically do that as well. I'm in the middle camp. I like to make a dedicated compost pile just off in the woods. It's nearby. I don't have to transport it a long ways away. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So here is the garden and the coop. I'm gonna make a spot. I don't want it super close to the garden where potentially the spores could intermingle, but I'm thinking maybe over here. It's kind of, there's already kind of an opening right here. So that'll be my pile. All right. And I'm just bringing these over with the cages just so that I'm limiting how much of the leaves drop over by the garden. Just since we had so many disease issues, I really don't want to deal with that again. A few more to go. This one took a wild ride, didn't it? Okay. I think we just have one left. That's a wrap for the tomatoes. Wahoo! Bring this whole big stack back over there. Well, it is a new day. I didn't quite get as much done last night as I wanted to. I feel like it always goes that way, but that's all right. It's a gorgeous day, and I thought now is probably the best time to do a soil test so we can do that together because the garden is largely empty now. I still have my brassicas back there. They're still doing great, and they've been tolerating the cold weather, so I don't have the heart to tear them out yet, but the garden's mostly empty, and I haven't added compost yet. I like to do my soil test before I add compost because adding fresh compost can kind of alter your results a little bit. Plus, compost is just kind of an overall mild nutrient booster, and I'm looking for big spikes when I look at the soil tests. And so even though, yes, I'm adding some compost after it, it's not going to correct those big spikes if I have them. I'm hoping not. Last year's soil test showed really deficient nitrogen levels, so I added blood meal in the spring. So are you guys scaring chickens? Tucker. Okay. Crisis averted. It's just the dogs scaring the chickens in the tall grass. I think they scared each other. So anyways, let's do a soil test, see what's going on in here. Then we'll add compost and then any amendments if needed based on the soil test. Okay, here is the soil test that I'm using. This is by My Soil. It's the same test that I did last year and I was really happy with it. It actually goes to the lab and it's definitely a lot more accurate than your at-home tests. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just think it's a great test and I'm happy to show it to you. I do have an affiliate link though. I'll link it in the description if you'd like this soil test. I always appreciate that. And I got 2 tests because I have 2 different sets of gardens. So this is going to be for my in-ground garden and this is going to be for my raised beds up by the house. And it comes with this cool soil sample probe, so we'll be using that. And I made sure to label in the boxes which one is which. So let's go ahead and do the in-ground garden together. And this is a pretty easy to use test. I was really happy with it last year. So you just take this out and now we just have this empty tray. We're going to collect our soil and make our sample, which will eventually go in that little container there. So let's get in the garden. So the goal when doing a soil test in a garden like this is you want to take a sample kind of throughout your garden so you get a good just kind of average of what your entire garden needs, because every row will be a little bit different. And if you absolutely wanted to do a perfect job, you could go and buy a separate soil test for every section of your garden because your corn is going to steal different nutrients than your brassicas will, and that'll be different than what your carrots stole from the soil. That's a little bit overkill for me. I'm fine with one test. We'll just get a general average by pulling a sample from each of the rows. So let's go ahead and start over here where the tomatoes were. I still have the straw down in here, so let's just kind of open up an area. And we want to take a sample. It's about 6 inches deep, which is about the top of the slotted piece. And we're just going to insert it into the soil and see what we get. And there's a nice little sample for us. And that wasn't too much soil, so I think I'm going to go ahead and do 2 samples per row. And here's row number 2, which was also tomatoes, but down here was peppers. So I think I'll do my sample here to kind of correspond to that type of a vegetable. My clay soil sure makes it really difficult, and I don't really want to stick my fingers in there and contaminate the soil. So I'm just going to use a stick here, try and get it out. There we go. Sample number 2. Now row number 4 is a little trickier because this is where my potatoes are. So I have a row of potatoes here and a row of potatoes here. I just haven't gotten around to harvesting them yet. I need to do it soon, but they're staying nice and cool under here. Yeah, the soil is really nice and cool with this thick layer of mulch. So they are happy as can be, but I probably should harvest them soon. Bed number 5, my very pathetic carrots, they got aster yellows terribly, I think, and so I don't even know if I'm going to get much to harvest out of here, but let's go ahead and get a sample. Try a better one. There we go. Okay, so here's our final sample that has all 13 rows worth represented. So I've just been kind of going through and breaking up any large chunks because I still have heavy clay soil. I'm also picking out any debris that's in here. And of course, giving it a good mix so that everything is well incorporated. And so now all we're gonna do is create a level scoop with the scoop that came with the test kit. Maybe a little bit more in there. That looks pretty good. And then we're just gonna add it to this container. There's a little nutrient absorbing capsule in there, which is kind of cool. So let's go ahead and do that together, I think. There we go. I wanna make sure not to dump any of the liquid out of here. There we go, it's nice and full. And just give it a good shake to incorporate everything. And that is it, my friends, for the back garden. I'll just do the repeat same steps for the raised beds. So the next thing that we need to tackle is mulch. So mulch is kind of a controversial thing and everyone has their own specific way of doing it. I'll just share mine. So I personally like to remove the mulch and start fresh in the spring. And the reason being, especially this year, I don't want to harbor any potential pests or disease in that mulch that could wreak havoc again in the spring, especially after this year. We had so many pests because we had a wimpy winter last year, and then we had all the disease like the blight because of all the rain that we got. And so I really just want a fresh start for spring. Hopeful that we'll get a real winter this year to knock down the pests. So I know it is probably best for my soil health to keep it covered for the winter, but this way just makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. And then next spring after planting, I'll make sure to mulch again with brand new stuff. One other tip I wanted to provide, because I do see beginner gardeners doing this sometimes, is tilling the straw into the soil. While that may seem like a good idea at first, it actually is not a good idea, because that straw, once it's in the soil, will start to compost down, and in that action of composting, it's going to pull nitrogen from your soil. So you'll end up depleting your soil. So it's best to keep it separate, just keep it on top, don't till it into the soil. So next up on the list is some weed control. So around the perimeter of my garden, I've really had quite the battle against the line of weeds wanting to go into my wood chips for my mulch. And of course, I don't want to spray Roundup or anything like that on our property, especially not next to our food. So I did a lot of research and I figured out that a 30% vinegar solution works pretty darn good. And it's safe, it's biodegradable, and I'll show you what it's been doing to the weeds, but it's not a one and done like the Roundup. You spray it and it's just completely done, including, I feel like, everything in a 30-mile radius. But this stuff is pretty sweet. I'll link it in the description. There are some weed fighting recipes out there that do just normal household vinegar mixed with salt, and that does work, but the problem with that is you're adding salt into your soil, and salt is one of those things that never goes away. So this higher potency vinegar works great as is. I don't have to add salt. You just have to do frequent applications. So let's go ahead and zip around and get hopefully my last application done for the fall. And this stuff really works best on a nice sunny day. Today is perfect. Low wind and just dry. You don't want to spray it right before it rains. But yeah, I've been really happy with it, but I think I can improve this even more. I'm never a fan of plastic in my garden, but I'm kind of thinking of doing some plastic edging, at least along here, so that the weeds aren't constantly creeping into my fencing and my wood chips. So we'll see. I don't have time to do that this fall, but maybe in the spring. We'll see what happens. I may even bring this and spray the remaining weeds on the walking paths now that most of the plants are out, because this stuff is potent. If it oversprays and gets on the leaves of your plant, it'll definitely cause some damage. So you want to be careful when you're spraying this, and your wind directions and all of that. Like here, I have my radishes and my baby greens. Definitely being careful not to overspray over there. Okay, so here is where we are at. The tomatoes and peppers are out. Oh, and these posts I couldn't get out by myself. They're way in there. I'm gonna need Ryan's help to get those out, but everything is largely out except for the potatoes. I still need to harvest those. It's too warm. I need to wait until it's cooler because I need a cool location to store those. So it's cooler in the ground. I'm gonna leave them. Same thing with the carrots, and I don't know, the carrots are so sad this year. The aster yellows were not kind to us there. We'll see if I get much to harvest. I have a little bit of corn left to clean up. That shouldn't take too long. And then the garlic is in, so I did end up planting that a week or two ago. I need to get some mulch on it ASAP, but I like to leave my mulch off for a couple of weeks just so that the bulbs get some heat so they can kind of start to grow, start to sprout. And then I put on the mulch to kind of tuck them away for winter. And then I still have a lot of my brassicas over here. So these guys are doing just fine until we really get into the super cold. So I'm not gonna touch those yet. So the next thing to talk about is fencing. So I use the temporary electric poultry netting for fencing, and I've always taken it down at the end of the season, but I don't think I'm gonna do it this year. And the reason why is the chickens love to get in there, and I don't mind it this time of year when I don't have a lot of produce, but the problem is once I put down any amendments or compost, they're just gonna start scratching around and they're gonna pull all that compost and amendments off and into the wood chips where it's gonna do no good. I know that's exactly what they're gonna do. And this wasn't a problem at our first homestead. My garden was tucked away far enough from the coop that they didn't really go back there all that much, but now they are right there. So it's causing some problems. I love having them nearby. They're super fun and I can throw them treats, but this part is a problem and I don't want them messing up everything. not only will I lose nutrients from my planting rows, but if they pull all of that off into the wood chips, then I'm gonna have lots of weeds growing in my wood chips. And so I think I'm gonna leave my fencing in place, even though it's technically temporary, and it will wear on it. It won't last as long, but it is what it is. I think that's what I'm gonna do this year. Okay, it's been a few days and today's mission is all about mulch. I have a handful of different perennials that need protected and tucked in before our long winter. And I like to use 3 different kinds of mulch. And right now we are in our little pine stand and we're gonna collect some pine needles. That is one of the kinds of mulch that I like to use. And we'll just kind of go through each types together. Now, pine needles are an awesome form of mulch, not only because they are free and very abundant for us here in our wooded lot, but they are slightly acidic. Not terribly, like they're not going to totally throw your soil off, but for things like my blueberry plants, they're going to absolutely love these. And I just love to use these fabric grow bags from Epic Gardening. They're just the perfect size for kind of hauling mulch back and forth. I guess I could technically use a wheelbarrow too, but I don't know. This works good for me. How are we doing? Hi guys. You want to help? You want to help me? Oh, thank you. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Hi. Okay, this is packed to the brim. Let's go spread it and then I'll show you mulch number 2 that I'm going to be using. Okay, so here are my 2 blueberry plants and they're just beautiful in the fall. I love using blueberry plants as landscaping. Highly recommend it. So I already have some pine needles here from last year, but we're just adding right on top. So make sure that they are nice and insulated for whatever kind of winter comes our way. I'm also going to add some here in my irises. There's also some weeds growing in here, so hopefully this added layer will suppress those. And pine needles are slightly acidic, not super acidic, but I'll take every little bit I can get. And blueberries love acidic soil, so may as well use them here. So next up here are my rhubarb plants, which were very sad this year. I think it was too hot next to the house, so I am going to end up moving them in the springtime. I'm not going to do it in the fall. We'll just kind of let them go to rest, and then in spring is the best time to transplant. So I'm going to go ahead and mulch them anyways though, just to protect them for the winter. Keep using the pine needles here. Thankfully rhubarb is really hardy when it comes to cold, so I'm not too worried about it, but we'll give them a little bit of help. Now this batch I just got from our pine trees over there, and there's a lot more leaves in it, which is totally fine. Leaves also make great mulch, so if that's all you have available to you, go ahead and use those. Okay, let's move on to mulch number 2. So this next section in my landscaping garden is largely my herbs. So like I have thyme here, rosemary. These are oregano and mint and lemon balm. These lettuces are not perennials, they won't come back, but down here my sorrel is, and same, well, my parsley will technically come back next year, but it'll just go to seed. So these guys will be replaced, but my sage should come back. So I already have a decent amount of wood chips here, but I was just gonna go ahead and top it off a little bit more. And I have a handy dandy pile of wood chips right here. This is where that big birch tree was. If you remember, it was kind of up here and broken and hanging. We finally cut it down. We have it cut into firewood lengths here. And then we chipped the rest of it into wood chips with our wood chipper. So I'm gonna get busy just kind of piling this on there. Probably should have brought a shovel for this, but oh well. And you might be wondering why I'm using pine needles up here and then the wood chips down there. So it's just due to minor things. If you only have one type of mulch, just go ahead and use that. For me, I like to use the slightly acidic pine needles just because I have it and I know that blueberries love acidity. But I also have my very convenient pile of wood chips just right there. So I kind of just tote over the pine needles for where I know it's really going to benefit my plants, and then use my conveniently located wood chips for the rest. So now we have mulch type number 3 to talk about. So even though I don't technically have perennials in my garden, I do have something in there for the winter, and that's my garlic. And it is a really hardy strain. I like the music garlic, and I've personally been growing and propagating my own seed garlic for maybe 8 or 9 years now, and so it's really well adapted to my climate, my soil, and just the harsh winters we have, but it's still a good idea to mulch it. So let's go ahead and do that. So in our garlic bed right here, I'm going to be using my third mulch, which is organic straw. I like to use organic straw because it's a temporary mulch. Because my garlic, I'm probably going to harvest in mid-July sometime and then turn that bed around quickly into bush beans. That tends to work pretty well for me with our short growing season here in Minnesota. So I don't want to use wood chips or anything that's going to be a bear to kind of move and switch the garden over. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I like to use fresh organic straw just to reduce any risk of disease or pests overwintering, but I just did inventory and I'm out. I don't have any more, so I need to head back to the farm that I get it from, and it's about an hour from here. And so probably not going to be over there for the next few weeks. So I think what I'm going to do is use the straw here that's where my corn was and my winter squash, because that was all pest free. It was all disease free as far as I know. So I'm pretty comfortable reusing this mulch. So we're going to do that. So make it work moment. And we're just gonna spread it out like so. Now for mulch thickness, I guess I haven't really touched on that yet. I just kind of eyeball it, you guys. Like, I don't know, 3 to 4 inches seems about right. Just make sure there's a good insulating layer. And the thing about Minnesota is typically we get a decent amount of snow. We did not last year, which was really odd, but that also serves as a great protective barrier as well. So hopefully we'll get some good snow this year, and that'll just provide some additional insulation. And another reason why I'm wanting to keep this fencing up is because the chickens, I just know it, would make a beeline for this and just pull it all off. So the fence is here to stay. So that's it for mulch. That was a pretty easy job. We were done with that in about an hour. So all we have left is, I do have some final cleanup, just little bits of corn left. And then my brassicas are still in here because we have had a pretty mild fall. The coldest we've gotten down to is 24 twice. So it's really not until we start hitting the teens that the brassicas start suffering. And so far in the forecast, we're looking all right. So we'll see how long this lasts, but I'll let them keep on cruising until the very last minute. And it's been about a week since we did that soil test together. I'm still waiting on the results, and I still don't have my compost yet. I thought I had a lead on compost. It's been challenging to find a good source of a lot of good, wholesome compost. I do a little bit of composting. I have my bins here, and then all the straw and chicken bedding is just in a pile over there, but I don't quite make enough to cover the whole garden. So I do have to outsource my compost. I absolutely love the composted cow manure that I got at my original raw milk farm before we moved, but they are well over an hour away, and we have to take our dump truck now to get, we're talking a lot of compost. And the dump truck gets, I think, 4 miles per gallon. So really have to be mindful of how far we're taking it. I was in contact with my new raw milk farm, which is a lot closer, but they have a lot of composted cow manure, but no way to load it into the dump truck. They don't have a skid steer or anything. So What I did last year is I did find another local farm that I thought was gonna be good and everything, but Ryan showed up with the dump truck load full of compost and it was filled with plastic and trash and just lots of animal bones. Like, I totally get it about composting animals, but it was just like, it was just a big trash pile. So not going back there. So I am back at the drawing board. I don't have any compost. We'll see if I can solve my problem by this fall. So we're not going to be putting down compost together in this video. Unfortunately, I need to get this video out to you guys. And then again with the amendments, still waiting on the soil test. So maybe that'll be a follow-up video. Let me know if you'd like to see kind of the results of the soil test, what amendments I'm putting down, how I put it down, the compost. Hopefully this fall I'll be able to put it down, just how it goes. So I guess this is it. This is pretty much a wrap. Again, the garden isn't completely done. Usually it is by now, so it seems a little incomplete, but we've done all the steps together and it was so fun to have you. Thanks for tuning in. I so appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the next video, which will likely be winterizing the chicken coop. So that is next on my list. Winter is going to come eventually, I hope. So we need to get them ready. Have a great day.